for being patient. New York City subway was not kind to Ms. Hassan today.
It's all right. I'm here. Thank you so much for your patience. Vaughn is a dear friend, sometimes collaborator, and someone whose career I admire and have attempted to follow in her footsteps. And so when she thought about this book, we talked about it in depth very early on.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so I feel very grateful to be here. I know all of you are familiar with Vaughn's work, so I want her to introduce herself because I think I would not do her justice.
Thank you, Hawa. I'm so touched. Hey, y'all. I'm Vaughn Diaz. Thank you for being here tonight. A little housekeeping. We're going to talk for a little bit, and then we'll open it up to questions, and then we'll do a signing right over here. So yeah, I'm Vaughn Diaz, daughter of Yvonne Webb, who's here in the room. Fabulous mother. I was born in Puerto Rico. I was raised in the suburbs outside of Atlanta. And I never thought that I was gonna be a writer, although my mom seemed to know that I was gonna be a writer. I started my career doing social justice work, and largely with women survivors of violence. And after some years doing that work, I found that being in constant proximity to grief was very difficult for me. And I transitioned into a storytelling role, which gave me the opportunity to sort of step back from what I was observing and to lift up the experiences of people that I was encountering. So that's how I came to be in front of y'all today. I've had lots of jobs. I'm a Sagittarius. But of late, I am a senior producer at StoryCorps, where I've been working off and on for a decade. StoryCorps is the nation's largest oral history project. We broadcast every Friday on Morning Edition. And in addition to my work as an oral historian, I also write and produce all kinds of things about food, including this tremendous book that it was my honor to work on. Tracy, just sign. And what else can I say? That's probably good.
Yeah.
I'm 42.
Okay, let's just jump in.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell me what inspired you to embark on this journey across oceans and nations to explore ancestral cooking?
Many things, although because you're here, I'll say that in addition to my own background and experience as a Puerto Rican woman, I was also inspired by books like MBB's Kitchen and many, many others that showcase the experiences of people that we don't often hear from in places that are very small, very remote, often places that are more touristed than they are studied or admired. And so in part, I notice that I do this, I grip the microphone like it's a hatchet. So being from Puerto Rico is really complicated, right? Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory. It is a colony, right? It is a part of the United States. It was invaded, and so it's a life of duality, of complexity, and over the years, particularly after I wrote my first book, Coconuts and Collards, I became more curious about the experiences of other islanders, right? I sort of put my scholarly hat on and was like, is it similar? Is a post-colonial experience similar, right? I suspected that it was, but colonizers are different, right? The British colonized certainly, the Spanish, the Dutch, etc. And so I wondered, okay, is there a way for me to study, to map post-colonial experience? Do islanders have something in common? And so that was my question, right? That was my research question. And very, very quickly, I discovered that yes, we have a lot in common.
I remember that. I remember when you were starting, that was the question you were just going over and over with, that you kept asking that. And it's so interesting to read the book now. I've been taking my time, so I'm not done with it yet. the connective tissue is there, and you've put it together all so beautifully. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Hawa.
Yeah. Could you share some of the most memorable experiences or encounters you had while researching and collecting these stories?
It might have been when I threw my back out in Puerto Rico and my fabulous photographer, Sibel Kodish, and my colleague Stephanie Rodriguez had to carry all of my stuff for me, and I overpack, like, as a default. So, no, but in all seriousness, let's see. One of the most, let's see, in terms of travel, Curaçao surprised me. I don't know what I expected of Curaçao. I think that a lot of times the images that we get of Curaçao are, rather very beautiful. You see Willemstad, right, with all of those like beautiful Dutch buildings with all the colors, and of course the like insanely blue water, and I kind of, I think I don't know, I didn't know what to expect. I definitely didn't expect it to be a desert, and I knew that it was a desert, right, because I'd studied it before I went there, but it was really interesting to be in a tropical environment, in an island in the tropics that is a desert. It's very dusty. The landscape is very sort of sepia, almost like sand color, like the color of my dress, and it's very African there. And I also, it felt to me, of the places that I have been to, even more so than Cuba, where I did scholarly field research when I was in grad school and undergrad. You see Africa all over Curaçao, and you see it in the food. And so they made, I'm gonna, maybe Sibel will remember, there's a dish there they make called tutu, and it's black-eyed peas that are cooked with a bit of cornmeal, and oftentimes with sugar and sometimes with cinnamon. But it's a savory thing that you eat with your food, and it's, it's a black-eyed pea cornmeal mash, it's like so quintessentially, it is a vestige of, a people that were, that really preserved their culture. So that was a really lovely experience. And then, in terms of my research, I was reflecting on this earlier, and one of the things that really shocked me, some of y'all may know that in Puerto Rico, we import upwards of 80% of our food, right? The numbers go up and down. Sometimes people say 90, some say 95, some say 80, right? That is actually true of all islands. I had always assumed that it was, sort of an outcropping of the Jones Act, but in fact it's more that most islands receive 3 times the amount of travelers to inhabitants, right? So there are 3 times as many people on islands that visit than the people that live there. So that really revealed something to me about this similarity between these places, right? Because again, we have tiny, isolated, remote places, environmentally vulnerable, hot climates that are importing most of their food, right? And so that's why you see these really dynamic cuisines.
I have to say, in reading the book, one of the things that I loved was how you continue to touch on climate throughout the book. Recently, I was in Colombia for 4 days, and I was texting with Vaughn. And Vaughn sent me like an hour-long video to watch about the history of how the Africans got there and what to eat and who to look for. And I was like, it's 2 a.m. and I'm here for 4 days. But
I know you're there for a wedding too. I was like, nah, you need some history.
Like, you gotta go see these people. But that's one of the things I love about being Vaughn's friend, because she's a historian every day of her life. Like, it's not a cap that she puts on and takes off. I just wanted to say that. Which brings me to my next question. How do you believe that the historical context of cooking techniques enrich the culinary experience for the reader? I think when we were doing in BB's Kitchen, I feel like times are so different, but there were many things that didn't go into the book because we didn't want to lose the reader. And in this book, it seems very different.
Well, you know, I've had several people say to me what you said to me at the beginning of this conversation, like, you've been talking to me about this for years. I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that I had been thinking about this for years until it sort of fell in front of me. And the techniques, which is how the book is organized, right? So Islas is organized by 6 ancestral culinary techniques. There are others I could have included, but I landed on 6 because I landed on 6. And maybe because my editor, Christina Garces, who's here, was like, come on, girl. Just write it in. As you can see, it is a big book. But the techniques, to me, as an organizing principle, really came about in like almost like an aha moment. I was outside in my yard in Durham. I hadn't had a yard in a while because I lived in New York for a decade. And it was the pandemic, and I was just cooking over fire all the time. I was just building fires, cooking things. And I just had a moment where I was like, wait a minute. It's how we cook, right? This is the connective tissue, because we have different ingredients, different histories, different cultures, different tools, but the way we cook defines what is produced, right? And so, you know, for those of y'all who are fans of food media, right, things have been moving in the direction of quick, easy, simple, approachable, weeknight, right? Those of us who write or produce food content, as they call it, this is what we're asked to do all the time. Can you make it quick? Can you make it easy? Can you take this, you know, 200-year-old ancestral dish and adapt it for my electric stove range and, you know, nonstick skillet? And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. Pero so in this like kind of techniques, that's how we organize it. I also felt that I could be of service, right? Because cooking freaks people out. I know a lot of people who are scared of cooking, and when I ask them, when they tell me why they don't like cooking, they're like, I'm gonna mess it up, or it takes so long, or it takes me 3 hours and I eat it in 2 minutes, and the dishes. I'm like, well, maybe there needs some efficiencies need to be built into your cooking practice, right? Like, and cooking is, cooking for oneself is so joyful and wonderful, and cooking for other people is so joyful and wonderful, that for me, I wanted to kind of demystify some of the techniques that people use to produce these ancestral dishes, to insist that they are in fact approachable, right? Deep frying to me is a perfect example. People are terrified to fry. And I understand, right? Porque el aceite salpica. ¿Cómo se dice salpica? Splatters, right. And that's very frightening, right? Because it might like pop and hit you, and you know, but it's like a mosquito bite, you know, like it's not pa tanto. And so like actually being, I say this, like cooking is, yes, it's about studying, it's about some talent, some craft, some mastery of skills and tools, but it also is about being brave, you know, like just like go for it. Be safe, right? Keep the oil at temperature, get a little candy thermometer. They don't cost any money. You know, you get one for $5. Test the temperature, have a splatter guard, make sure you don't have water on your hands. This is like basic science. And I got B's in science classes, right? But I didn't know that. Put water in oil, when it's hot, it will be a disaster. So yeah, so that's sort of, for me, it was, you know, preserving the history and the culture of these places, many of which are literally disappearing, right? Coastlines are being washed away all over the tropics. And again, this service component, right? To introduce some people to the techniques of islands, but then also to honor and lift up for folks who are descendants of these people, to know that they can keep making their people's food. You know?
Yeah, no, I do know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna skip my number 4 question and we can come back to it later,
Okay.
because you and I had talked about it. But
Listo.
in your opinion, what sets islander cooking techniques apart from culinary traditions around the world?
You know, islanders have to cook in ways that are, islanders need to master techniques that can be accomplished under the most difficult circumstances, right? Your power goes out, which subsequently means that your water goes out. You don't have access to ingredients because you can't leave your house. You don't have access to fuel. Your power's out, so what else has happened? You've got no internet, you've got no phone, and your refrigerator is out, right? So just the absolute worst possible conditions, and you still need to feed yourself and your family. We saw this, obviously, Hurricane Maria, the most recent, most dramatic example of how long people in Puerto Rico had to suffer through just nothing, right? And islanders go through storms every single year. And it's not if but when, and then when, but how hard, right? So the storm systems make these places incredibly environmentally vulnerable. Those storm systems are worsening amidst climate change, we know that definitively. And so island cooking has to be possible under those circumstances. And one thing that I've been reflecting on a lot over the last week or so, as I'm looking at this book every day, is, as a Puerto Rican, I have never cooked meat that wasn't seasoned. We love seasoning. We love flavor. Island food to me is incredibly flavorful, right? The only thing I put just salt and pepper on is a really nice steak, right? Because that's what you should do with a really nice steak. But everything else gets adobo, sazon, all kinds of different flavor profiles. And so I think the things that define island cooking are an adherence to these kind of really basic cooking techniques, combined with a real, a layering of flavor, right? And sometimes that layering happens through physical layering, and sometimes it's more subtle, right? The kind of layering that happens when you stew or braise, because you start with your sofrito, you cook it down, you get it then you add something else that cooks down, you add something else that cooks down. And the flavor, right? Like, I think many of us who've had things like a Puerto Rican sancocho. A sancocho is a stew many of y'all have had it's root vegetables. It's typically one or two different kinds of meat, but the sancocho has a flavor and a smell. It doesn't matter how they change the ingredients, like you smell it, you taste it, and that is sancocho, right? That's the kind of layering that I see a lot in island cuisines. And I also find a real playful, I think that island food is playful. And I think that it's playful because a lot of times you have sort of a palate, right? Your palate might be rice, it might be mashed root vegetables or some other starches, and then you have some sort of flavorful, saucy deliciousness, and then a spicy something, or like a grassy something. I mean, island cuisine, as you will see in Islas, is dynamic, flavorful, exciting, and memorable.
I love that. Yeah, whenever I'm on an island, I think about how much we don't respect fire when we're, in our actual homes or anywhere else. I love the idea of flavoring through fire. That's one of the things that I'm always struck by, the simplicity of the food and the layering of the fire that adds to that on islands.
Yeah.
How did you go about selecting these recipes?
The simple, truest answer is that I'll never put anything in a cookbook that I don't want to eat. So I want to eat everything in this book, and that was sort of the first metric, right? Like, if I'm going to produce these recipes, now granted, I have a pretty expansive palate. I like most things. It's internal organs that I still can't get down with, but pretty much everything else I'll enjoy. I really want to, just I'm not there yet. But that was the starting point for me. There were a couple of things that I was really curious about, like cow hoof stew, which is eaten in throughout the Caribbean, right? And I can get down with tendon and things of that nature, but I did think about the reader, right? I was like, well, how many people have access to cow hoofs today? Does this dish translate to today? So for dishes like that, the inquiry was interesting to me, right? I was like, well, I want to study this, but I don't want to eat it. So those are the kinds of things that I sort of was like, well, that's how I'll decide. right? Does it seem delicious to me? And above all, does it tell a good story? Because a lot of the dishes in this book are tell really rich stories about the people and places and history of those places.
I love that. Thank you. What challenges did you face documenting and translating these traditional cooking methods into accessible recipes for readers? We know that can be very difficult.
Yes, it's fun though. You know, I think it's fun. I started writing about food, literally reading my grandmother's copy of Cocina Criolla, which is like the most famous book of Puerto Rico, right? And the recipes in Cocina Criolla are very old. They were written in the 30s, 50s, somewhere in the 40s, 50s. I used to know this, but I don't know. Pero nada, long time ago. And the book, the way that the recipes are written, there is no photos. There's no illustrations. It's just, and it's actually kind of a cool structure because they're like tables. They're almost scientific. And as I was reading those recipes, you know, I'd be like, huh? Like there's a recipe for fried chicken in Cocina Criolla that says to fry the chicken for 2 hours in lard. And I was like, that's too long. That's too long. You know what I mean? Like I was just like, espérate un momentito. Like let me look at this closely. So I really love that part of the process where I'm like, wait a minute, is that what they meant? And a lot of older ancestral recipes, or like recipes that are like that your grandma tells you, you're like, are you sure it's that amount, right? So then it's like this journey. It's like an excavation. Like, what did they mean? And is that the right word? Oh gosh, I hope this comes to me. Something happened that taught me something. One thing, like, I may not be pronouncing this totally right, but piglets, which is a Haitian, spicy Haitian, okay. So it's a condiment. It's a Haitian condiment.
It's the green one?
It's like a slaw to me. That's what it looks like, but it's a condiment. So it's actually more like a relish. Yeah, that's right. So when I saw the recipe, I grew up in the South, right? I saw the recipe, I was like, ooh, it's a spicy slaw. It's not a spicy slaw, it's a relish, right? There's a difference between a slaw and a relish, right? A slaw is something you eat like a salad. A relish is something that you use as a condiment. And then I met a few, I randomly met a few Haitian folks. I was like, oh, I have this recipe in my book. And they were like, I've had a jar of piglets in my fridge, in my pantry for like 5 years. I just keep adding to it like a mother. You know what I mean? I was like, wow. I did not know. You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't know that because I'm not of that culture, so I had to talk to people. Another story that brings me a lot of joy is there's the Braising and Stewing chapter in Islas is about Madagascar. And the woman that I profile, Perline Ernestine, is the first woman in her tiny fishing village of Maraota, which is remote, only navigable by water. And she is the first woman to lead their fishing association, which I suspect anywhere in the world being the first woman to do something is significant, right? Even if I don't fully understand the culture, I can understand the significance. She's also a mother of 4. And I learned about her through the World Wildlife Federation in Madagascar. Decided to profile her, but that place is very remote. I know I would never be able to get there. I also definitely did not speak the language. They speak a very specific dialect, right? And so I was able to connect with a photographer who'd been out there before and hired him to go back and shoot photography. And when he brought me back the photography, I was able to see how she cooked. Because he had asked her a few times, like, what do you cook for your family? I make cassava with fish, right? What's in cassava with fish? Or a little oil, little onion, little curry. How do you cook it, right? And I couldn't call her. I couldn't text her. I couldn't email her. I couldn't go to her to ask her how she made it. So I got this wealth of photographs from this photographer, and I was able to literally, and they were beautiful, hugely high resolution photos, right? I was able to zoom in, right? And look really closely at the way they built the fire, look really closely at the kind of fish. Did they leave the bones on, And then I adapted my version of Perline's cassava with fish, which I cooked outside over an open fire to try to get it like as close as I could imagine, but the journey to writing that recipe was so satisfying, you know? what I wouldn't do to send it to her and have someone translate it for her so she could see that she's inspiring other people, right, through this very, very simple dish.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm gonna ask one more question and then I'm gonna turn it over to the audience because I know Vaughn would love to hear from everyone here, or as many people as possible. What do you hope readers will take away from this book, just beyond the recipes?
So many things. I hope that readers come away with a more robust understanding of island communities. And I really hope that people will buy Islas, read the stories, cook the recipes before they go visit some of these places, you know? Because, you know, as I said earlier, the recipes tell stories, and through them, you can actually get to know people, you can get to know ingredients, stories of migration, and you know, I love traveling. I have been very, very fortunate to have traveled to a lot of places. I was a military kid. I graduated high school in the Netherlands. One of the 4 people that I graduated from high school with is in the room right now. I haven't seen in a long time. It was a small international, American international school. But I love traveling, and I do actually love being a stranger, you know, like I love wandering, I love getting to know things. But we live in a complicated world, and I think that we owe people the respect of learning about who they are before we go walk around in their land, you know? And food is such a tremendous way to get to know people that, you know, I got no problems with all-inclusive resorts. I've never been to one because I can't afford one yet. But like, you know, one quick anecdote here, that when I was in the Seychelles, which I was very fortunate to get to travel to, y'all, bucket list, high. It's not what you think, and it's hard to describe. It's just lush, it's lush. It smells like cinnamon everywhere, just beautiful. I got to meet a chef of a resort on the island there and was just chatting with him. I was like, what's the hardest thing for you? And he said, you know, sourcing smoked salmon. Because tourists all over the world have a real love of smoked salmon and need it everywhere, apparently. And for those of y'all who don't know where the Seychelles is situated, it's closest to Somalia, actually, if I'm not mistaken. And it's in the middle of the Indian Ocean, teeny. And the waters surrounding Seychelles are some of the most like fish-rich waters in the world. And this tiny island archipelago is struggling to import smoked salmon, right? So part of what I hope readers take away is like, no. Eat something different. Just try it. You know what I mean? Like, what's the worst that can happen? It's too spicy? No problem. Drink some milk, you know? It's like, you didn't like it? That's okay. It's okay. It's okay to not like something, you know? Say thank you. You know, say thank you. I'm not crazy about that. Can I try something else, right? Because it's through appreciation too that we show respect. And I think that a lot of us who come from communities where we eat together, you know that when someone feeds you, you do appreciate it. That's how you show respect. So.
Well, thank you for that.
Thank you, Hawa.
Yeah, I'll just end here before I turn to everybody. I will say so far what I've read in the book, it draws you in a way that I've not seen in a long time, and it offers you a chance to be curious. And I want to say thank you to you for that, because as you know, I love to travel, but looking at these photos, reading these recipes and these stories, it's mind-boggling that more of this isn't covered every day. So bravo to you, Vaughn.
Thank you, Mama.
Yeah. Any questions?
Hello.
Hi.
So you've traveled many places, you've interacted as a scholar with a lot of different people. And I'm sure you've taken a lot from those different cultures. What do you think you've given to the people that you've interacted with and the cultures?
I don't think I can answer that unilaterally, right? I think I can answer that with specificity. One example that's very fresh is in my research for Islas, I learned about a man named Badru Dean, who is from Trinidad, and his family invented doubles, Trinidadian doubles. And Badru was the 7th of 9 children. He is the descendants of Indian indentured servants who were brought to Trinidad following the emancipation of enslaved African people, and treated in much the same fashion, right? It's like slavery by another name. I couldn't give him the space that his story deserved in the book. I ran out of time. And doubles as a recipe was more than I could take on in the timeline of the book. So, but he gave me a lot. He gave me his family story. He gave me permission to tell his story in the book. And so I had this like bug in me. I was like, I have to do something with Badru. So as I started to promote this book, I pitched a story to the New York Times. And I said, listen, I started working on this for Islas. I couldn't really build it out. I'd like to. What do you think? And they said yes. So it runs tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. In the print paper on the 20th, but tomorrow digital. Yes, which is, it was a stressful day actually. It's all good. I like writing for the Times, so sometimes I'm like, today. The way that I work with people is very much defined by my practice as an oral historian, right? I was trained as an oral historian, and it's a different type of work, right? It's not a straightforward interview. The principles are really about exchange, collaboration, participation, consent is a big part of the practice of doing oral histories. And so with Badru, when I approached him, I said, hey, sir, he's also an elder, he's in his 70s, right? Mr. Dean, I would very much like to write about you for the New York Times. Here's how it's gonna go. I'll start like this, I'll pitch my team, then I'll come back to you, make sure you're comfortable. Then we'll get an edit in, and I'll come back to you and make sure you like it. And then we'll do another round, and you'll hear from me by this day with an updated recipe and a new draft, right? And I'm not always that collaborative with the people that I interview, but this is his family's story. And he gave me, and the New York Times and the world, his family's recipe, right? And he's never published it before. So that's when I can, that's what I do, right? Is like, okay, you gave me this little nugget, this soundbite for a piece that I wrote. How can I build it? How can I expand it? And he's going in for, he's having bypass surgery. He just told me 2 days ago. So keep him in your thoughts. Badru Dean, he lives in Fort Lauderdale. But he wrote me, I sent him the final, like, hey, here's how it's gonna look. And he wrote me today, he's like, you have given what did he say? He said, you've given my family's history wings. And I'm like, I live for it. I work hard for it, but it's, if you have the time, it's gotta be like that. They deserve it. Thanks for the question.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, come on. See, Jorge.
You touched upon a little bit about sort of climate change and the impact. I mean, how do you think cooking in these islands will evolve as either ingredients evaporate, space evaporates? Just in what ways will we see sort of like a change in what these recipes might be like?
Two things come to mind. One, I think all of the people who were not cooking in that way are gonna be looking to islanders to figure out what to do. And one of the takeaways actually from Islas that I hope people really get is like, islanders have the key, to survival. And so I think that as climate change continues to expand and descend, we need to look to them. But in terms of how the cooking will evolve, you know, I mean, that's kind of the point of island cooking, right? It's like you suddenly don't have something, no problem, replace it with something else. Curaçao is actually a really interesting example of this. They have a dish called kadushi, which is this wild, you remember, it's about this wild layered stew that was designed basically to replicate the texture and the flavor of an okra stew, right? Okra features prominently in a lot of African dishes, a lot of West African dishes. And while that sliminess is like what turns people off about okra, oftentimes it is actually delicious and desirable to the people for whom that's a big part of their cuisine. And so in Curacao, there was no okra, it's a desert, right? And so okra didn't grow there, but cactus did. So and tons of cactus because it's a desert, right? And cactus does have a slightly similar flavor, definitely a similar texture. And mucilaginous, that's the word to describe okra, which my editor kept trying to remember. I remember Christina was like, but it's not like mucilaginous. I'm like, but it is. It is. There's no other word to describe it. But anyway, and so kaduchi is this, apparently they spend a week making it, right? And it's like all of this layering, shellfish, spices, cactus. And then you end up with this soup that like literally is like a string of like mucilaginous broth. And it is fortifying, right? It is, you know, it's supposed to make men more, you know, virile. As many ancestral stews in ancestral culture stew. And then now they eat something called gyambo. In Curacao is a little bit more common, less layering, less thyme, and okra. But gyambo took the shape of kaduchi. So basically, an okra stew from West Africa was transformed into something called kadushi with cactus, and then retransformed into a stew with okra, but with the flavor of the kadushi. So it's just cool, you know what I mean? Like it's amazing. You're like, wow, they're just gonna keep figuring out how to get either the feeling, the texture, the flavor, right? Because I think for each culture, it's a little bit different. You know, you might be trying to get the feeling of the dish, or you might be trying to get the flavor of the dish, and that will change the techniques you use. Thanks for your question. See, Alejandra.
Hello.
Hi.
Just a quick aside. In my show, we would call it we would call it a slippery pull.
Ooh, I got you. Slippery pull.
Slippery pull.
Okay, I'll remember that. Oh yes.
That was like the producer in my ear.
Thank you.
Yeah. But my question, this is something we've talked about in the past with regards to Puerto Rico. It's actually how we met on that panel, talking about how do you determine what is the recipe? Essentially, when you're coming into a new space, interviewing, learning, researching, how do you then determine which is the recipe that I guess best honors what the dish should be, which then ends up in the book?
Dang.
Should have warned her.
I know. No, I love that question. You know, I think that when I had the good fortune of finding multiple recipes for some of these dishes, I would compare them, right? And I think for me as a cook, I'm a self-taught home cook, right? I have like basic tools, you know, I just bought a pan off Amazon that is amazing. Like the best pan I've ever had. But you know what I mean? Like I have a basic kitchen. I've lived in 28 homes. That's a story for another time. I've had 28 kitchens of all shapes, sizes, colors, you know. And so when I look at recipes and imagine adapting them, right, or feel like I want to feature them in a book, I must look at them through the lens of what I know how to cook well, right? So I might be like, that ingredient I'm not so great at. There's an ingredient like, por ejemplo, I don't know why, but I can't flip anything. I can't pancakes, over easy eggs. I've tried to make like patties lots of time. Like I can't flip. Se me rompe every single time. I can't make an omelet. Like I'm like, why? Why is this? You know, so if I look at a recipe and there's a flip in it, I'm like, nah, not that way. I'm not gonna, I just won't make it well. I'm terrible at dough, like flour on my hands really irritates me. But I just hung out with a baker who was like, no, that's normal. And I was like, I still don't like it. So, you know, like I do think that the recipes bear the mark of the cook, right? And so, you know, for some folk, like I just adapted Badruddin's, I tested his family's recipe, right? And man, did that bara come out good the first time. That's the fry bread that's in it. And I was like, this is a solid recipe because I'm terrible at this. You know what I mean? This is something that I fail at, and I got it the first time, and I was like, there you go. You know, it's also, I think, the way that recipes are, recipes should be, you should be able to imagine making it when you read it, right? So, and that's about clarity and also simplicity, you know, and breaking up, because like a lot of our ancestral dishes have lots and lots and lots of steps. And sometimes they're multi-day processes, right? So I'll go ahead and tell y'all a hot take. Today, I launched on my Substack, which is La Piña, an audio companion to Islas. I did this in part in honor of my mother, who loves audiobooks and listens to them all day long while she's gardening. But it was also for me, right, like this world wants a lot from us, right? Like this kind of constant, voracious, give me more content. I hate this word content. I don't like it. Pero I live in this world and I do want to get these stories out. And writing takes me longer than it used to. I'm a slow writer now. So I'm sharing this now because part of what I hope to do is with the recipes in Islas, I'm gonna read them like I'm reading them for someone who's visually impaired, right? Like I'm gonna read them like, okay, like this is the texture, this is the sound, this is the smell you're looking for. Here's like, here's how you know that this pineapple is ripe. You know what I mean? And really walk people through, because we live in a really multimedia world. Maybe recipes on a page are, you know, out of date a little. You know, maybe we need the recipes on the page and the voice and the beautiful TV shows. You know what I mean? And the films and all these other things. So.
In a way, that's kind of going back because the recipe on the page wasn't first.
Exactly. And I think that's why it feels kind of organic, you know, because like, yeah, look, my recipes are guides, and also like they'll bear the hands of your kitchen. You know what I mean? Like you have to adapt them so that they work for you. Thank you.
But Alejandra, I will add, in telling a people's story. I will say, in telling a people's story, one of the things that is incredibly difficult is trying to teach a new audience the sum of a recipe.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
these people use Maggie cube, but I'm not,
Right.
you could also use a bouillon cube, you know what I mean? And I think even when I do it with my team or me, I mean, we watch YouTube videos that are like in a dark room with an older woman or an older guy, and they, you know, they've got like 100 views and 50 of them are just from me, you know, like literally like, oh, what was that? But when you're presenting these recipes to an audience that's not familiar with it, the last thing you want to do is do an injustice. You know, if you're making something from Congo, it's like, ooh, okay,
Yeah.
well, they don't have smoked dry fish. You know, they can't go to the market and get dried goat on a skewer. So how do I, you know? But I do think it's the sum of the recipe that you end up sharing, and then offering in the head note saying, these people use this,
Right.
but for you, you know, giving context.
I love that. The sum of the recipe.
Sorry,
No, that's yours.
I love that for me.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, how is this different from writing your first book?
Ay, Dios
This
santo.
process.
Listen, night and day. Well, my first book was a culinary memoir, and so I dug deep into dark corners of myself and revealed them to the world And you know, it's interesting. I've spent a lot of my life in community with artists, photographers, painters, sculptors, you know, of all ilk, musicians, and learned through them that you know, for many artists, the self-portrait is the first thing you create. That's how you practice your craft. That's how you kind of get to know what you're good at. So I feel like my first book was a self-portrait, and one that was you know, an exploration of duality of place. This book is a love letter to islands. This book is was a joy to write. It was very hard. I felt a tremendous responsibility. I mean, my editor can attest. I had so many mini meltdowns, being like, I just gotta get it right. I gotta get it right. You know, like I'm holding a lot of people here. You know, I'm holding a lot of hands in this book, and so I checked with them over and over and over again. I texted them, and you know, and so I feel very privileged to have this platform. I feel very privileged that Chronicle chose to buy this book and gave me the resources to produce it. And I want to do it all over again, which is crazy, but I do, and I do have another book in me that's going to be similar, and tease that it will be a different geography. But editors in the room. You heard that? All mucilaginous. Slippery. What did you say? Slippery poles. Oh, that sounds like something else.
Ooh. I heard saying that on TV.
Yes, that's true. Okay. Pero, yes, no, this was a totally different project. I approached it like a producer. I approached it, well, and one thing actually that I'm happy you asked this question, because I have to underscore that this book was a production. An amazing designer, Lizman, amazing editor, Christina Garces, amazing illustrator, Daniela Jordan Diaz, I think. 2 editors, one production assistant, Sofia Ramirez, and Stephanie Rodriguez was my editor, 2 recipe developers, Bridget Washington, who's Trinidadian, Jen de la Vega, who's Filipina, and that was on purpose. I wanted different flavor profile experts in my camp. And then I worked with 5 photographers. Isabel Kodish, who's in the room, Lauren B. Allen, who's local in Durham, fabulous talent, so cool, so young, mom of 2. And then 3 photographers, one in Vanuatu, one in Guam, and one in Madagascar, the places I couldn't get to. And then collectively, right, like, and this is like, oh, there's only one man in this group, but it felt like a very, like feminine gesture, right? Like, this is a collective, and this is a collective project. I want to know what you think. I want to know how you feel. This is what we're thinking it'll look like. Here's how we're thinking it'll sound. And that is how I like to work, and that is how I will continue to work, because it's really satisfying. You know, it's satisfying to share this with all of these amazing people, plus the people that are profiled in the book. Before we wrap, I need to do some thank yous. I should have done that at the beginning. I'm terrible at this. Thank you to my mother, Yvonne Webb, the sunshine in my life. She's got her wave down. Isabel Kodish, who I've mentioned a zillion times, who has worked with me on 2 books, including this one and the next one. And we've done lots and lots of things together. My editor, Christina Garces, who literally thousands and thousands of words. Allison Farges, who is my agent, new in my life, and takes text messages from me, y'all. Not every agent does that, but I can. She lets me text her. What do you think? My team at Chronicle, Erica, who's also new to my life. Y'all, this work is hard, you know, but it's like it takes this entire wonderful community of people to be a part of lifting up the voices of these folks. So, thank you. Oh shoot, I will be on Good Morning America tomorrow morning. I thought my call time was 6, but it's 7:20, so I'm taking it. Yes. Yes, it is my first time on live television. A big part of why my mom traveled here with me. I was like, Mommy, I need you. I don't know how to do something here. I will be cooking from Islas, lemongrass adobo marinated grilled chicken with pineapple. With Mom, what was the name of the host? Gio? Gio Benitez will be the, and it's at 8:45. Taylor Swift also drops a new song tomorrow. She's not gonna be on the show, but I know that that's happening. So yes, please tune in, share. Please subscribe to my newsletter. It's y'all. I have a full-time job and I'm writing stuff, so it's a little slow, but it's good. When it comes out, it's good. And I'll be releasing the audio companion to Islas weekly, starting next week. And there'll be every piece will be a little treasure, a little different than the last. Anything else I missed, team? Okay. And thanks to y'all for coming here. Seriously, I do think that at least half the people in this room live in Brooklyn. I think the proportion is more than that, so I know the journey that you took to be here.